And now I'm going to introduce our next session. To end the Recreate focus this morning, let me introduce our next panel. You may have the next big idea, but how do you go about making it a reality? When do you take the leap into entrepreneurship? Hear from some of our female founders on how they took their idea, pivoted, and turned it into a viable business in this panel. REestablish female-founded startups. Let me turn it over to Kelly Bonnell, Executive Director of Main Street Ventures and co-moderator of this panel, to introduce this great group of founders.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here for Startup Cincy Week. Thank you, ladies, for being here as well, because as we all know, your time as entrepreneurs especially is just cut so, it's slim. So really appreciate you guys being here. And so I am Kelly Bonnell. My name, that is my name. I am with Main Street Ventures. What day is it? I am currently the executive director for Main Street Ventures. We are an organization that exists within the Startup Cincy ecosystem to empower the next generation of entrepreneurs. And we do that in the form of equity-free funding. So actually all three of you are former grant recipients, so couldn't be more thrilled to have you here. And I'm so excited to have Nancy Eichholz with me as well. And Nancy, I'll pass it to you so I don't speak for you. You can introduce yourself.
You could probably do a better job. I'm Nancy Eichholz. I'm the president and CEO of Aviator Accelerators, and we exist to empower female founders in every industry at all stages of their business cycle. Emily is a very recent former flight night winner from Aviator, so I'm really excited to introduce the rest of the panel and I'm going to have you introduce yourselves, because if I go on, I will go on forever because I know a lot about your first two, and I'm dying to learn more about Tamia. So, Emily?
Yes, I just also want to say how honored I am to be up here with these incredible women. I'm Emily Bruns. I am co-founder of Eclipse Camper Vans. We provide a unique travel experience by renting camper vans that are custom built and thoughtfully designed for first-time campers to lifelong adventurers. We hope to help people connect with nature, themselves, and others.
Awesome. Thanks for having me as well. I'm Abby McInturf, co-founder of Band Connect. We're a care delivery platform that extends the in-clinic musculoskeletal rehabilitation experience into the patient's home via asynchronous virtual care. So we're providing a simple, portable, cost-effective, and camera-less solution to help empower patients at home to treat their musculoskeletal conditions.
Everybody's so impressive. I'm Tamia Stinson. I'm the founder of Tether, which is a community and network that connects the local image makers. So typically we're talking about photographers, videographers, hairstylists, wardrobe stylists, which is what my background is in. And the idea is to connect that community of people with the larger business community so that we can all work together and form an ecosystem that allows everybody to be successful.
Thank you. I mean, talk about the diversity in terms of business ideas here, ladies. I mean, this is such an incredible panel to have. I'm so excited for everyone to hear from you. And so how we're going to structure this panel is we have a few questions that we'll go back and forth asking just to really kind of get at your entrepreneurial journey, sharing your insights and wisdom, especially as female founders, and the different challenges and opportunities too that we have as female founders. So I'll kick it off first with the question about how did you realize that there was a problem you wanted to solve, right? Because all of the businesses that we have, all of our ideas start with this idea or this recognition of a problem. So to me, I'll start with you, if you don't mind, about tell us a little bit about how you knew that there was a problem.
Sure, I got the mic, why not? So like I mentioned, I have a background in wardrobe styling, and there were a couple things that sort of triggered this idea for me. One of them was that I noticed that a lot of my peers and people that I was working with were leaving Cincinnati. They were going to Chicago or LA or New York because they felt like there was more opportunity there. But in reality, we have a number of Fortune 500 companies just within a 1-mile radius of where we're sitting right now. So I thought, okay, there has to be a way to connect these two communities so that we can all work together. And then also, as a wardrobe stylist, I kind of got out of the business, but I would still get people who wanted to work with me, which is super, obviously, very honored. But if I wasn't available or didn't have time, then I was like, well, how can we make it easier for people to reach out to each other and connect so that we can all collaborate? So that was basically where the idea came from.
Awesome. Abby, yeah.
Yeah, I can go next. So my experience was I haven't met anyone that has had a good experience in physical therapy. If you have, come talk to me. But the reality is that 70% of patients' total treatment is at home, and physical therapists don't have the ability to engage with patients when they're not in the clinic. Instead, they're given sheets of paper handouts with stick figure drawings, and patients are oftentimes unmotivated or they lose their sheets of paper, which results in only 35% of patients complying with their plans of care. And to me, the more I've digged into it, like, it's an extremely archaic process. And just hearing everyone's personal stories as I've gone through this journey is kind of what motivates me to keep going.
Emily, what about you?
Yeah, so we didn't invent camper vans, obviously, but I was lucky enough to take a trip to Iceland with my husband, and we rented a camper van there. We love the idea of being able to travel around the island and sort of with a lot of freedom. When we had the camper van, we were like, oh, this is so convenient, everything we need. All of the stuff is sort of packed away, but it was just basically a van and a platform bed, and that sort of got, the wheels turning, thinking about how could I do this better. And we needed something like this in the Midwest because there's so many places to visit and great opportunities to be outdoors. And so, yeah, there was definitely a hole here in the Midwest that we felt like needed to be filled.
So hang on to the mic. We'll just stay in order. So the next question, Emily, is, so taking that idea, how did you know, or when did you know, I guess, that your idea was worth turning into a business?
I think we had been doing it sort of as a side hustle for about a year, and I was working a full-time job, and as well as my other co-founder, Sophia, and it was gaining traction. We hadn't really done any advertising or really put the word out much, but people were able to find us, and they were renting. So I feel like a little bit, 6 months into, about a year into it, we just kind of felt like, man, we could really take this to the next level, jumping in full-time. So. I guess about a year, and then the pandemic hit, and it was a great way to travel. It was a safe way to travel. So that kind of like blew things up, and then we definitely decided to go full in.
Awesome, yeah. So I think for me, the moment was when I was doing some customer discovery and went into physical therapy clinics, and everyone, there was no like, oh, this won't work. It was everyone was on board, and that was across the board from physical therapists to surgeons to clinic managers. And I think that was really the opportunity because we just had a concept at that time, and these people we were talking to were willing to get on board and help us get into their clinics and start testing our platform. So I think that was kind of the moment where I was like, okay, this isn't just like an idea anymore. This is a problem that needs to be solved.
Cool. Yeah, I wish I had a concrete answer to that question. That would be fantastic if anyone has any ideas. I think I knew that it was a potential business when, similar to you, other people decided to get on board. I actually started the company or the organization with a fellowship from People's Liberty, and when I realized that their team, which has seen however many ideas come across their table, thought that it was good enough to award, I was like, okay, this sounds like a thing that could potentially work. And then, there's always that reinforcement that comes from talking to people on a regular basis. I just had a conversation with a lawyer who used to be a videographer last week, and he was super interested. He was like, I'm in a different business now, but this 100% sounds like something I could have used when I was in the business. So, every now and then, and I'm sure you guys can relate, you get those little moments of, okay, no, I'm actually going in the right direction.
A lawyer who used to be a videographer. That is a
That's
very
unusual,
unique
right?
skill set. No offense.
The
all
transition.
respect to lawyers. It's definitely using.
He must have done well during the Zoom era.
Right? Yes. Let's talk about using both sides of your brain there. But actually, during the pandemic, it strikes me as you guys are all sharing your stories how great of an opportunity, but how terrifying it must have been during this past year, especially for Emily and Abby, you two starting during the middle of a pandemic or right before a pandemic, and Tamia, you charging through it. So this next question is probably really even still relevant in your face, I would imagine. But talk about what risks you faced bringing this idea to life. Pandemic, obviously a huge one. But I'd love to hear a little bit more, and actually we'll start with Emily for this one, or Abby for this one.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll take it back before the pandemic. So I think the risk for me was like getting on board and coming like full-time onto this project. So my background's in industrial design, and I graduated from UC's DAP program in 2018, and Band Connect started as one of my class projects. And it started as a concussion prevention tool, but when I graduated, I went through the UC Venture Lab program, and that's when we recognized a greater need in the physical therapy space. But I think it was that moment that was the biggest risk for me, because a lot of my peers were graduating and moving to the coast and getting these jobs at consultancies where industrial design jobs are more prevalent. And I felt that taking this risk was questionable at the time, but I'm so glad that I did it. But I feel like that decision was hard for me, just seeing everyone kind of get that tangible win right off the bat, where it took me a lot longer to get there.
Awesome. Emily, well, that'll be weird with the mic, but we'll work with it. We'll deal with it.
So I think initially when we started, Sophia and I thought, well, when we were building out our first van, like, what's the worst that can happen? Nobody rents our van, and we get to use it. So we were like, yeah, for sure, this is not a problem. But as we decided to make the leap into me going full time, this was right before the pandemic and kind of a little bit in the pandemic. And I was a full-time teacher, health insurance, all of those wonderful things that come with a steady full-time job. But I just, I think you listen to your gut, and you have people who are coming and wanting your service. And I think I felt like it might have on the outside seemed like a big risk, but like I just had the confidence and felt like I was doing the right thing. So in a way, it didn't really seem like a huge risk.
Yeah, I would say the risk is always failure, right? So thinking about, am I wasting my time? For me, it was, am I wasting these people's money? What other opportunities could I be taking advantage of instead of doing this right now? So there's always that risk. But I think, to your point, you kind of have to trust your gut and go with where your gut and your heart is leading you at the moment. And that's typically the right direction to go in.
Awesome.
So one of the things we talk about a lot in aviator world is funding for women. And we all know that we just have different challenges, and that we still have a very long way to go. There are some really sort of scary stats if you really look at the stats, so you have to sort of forget that and just go for it. But I was wondering, what kind of funding have you accessed, and what challenges did you face when you were accessing that funding? And let's see, why don't we start with Tamia, since you've got the mic, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Well, like I mentioned, I got a fellowship grant through People's Liberty to initially get Tether off the ground, which was extremely helpful. So the funding itself was not so much of an issue as how to reasonably, responsibly spend the money in a way that I didn't feel guilty about. I felt like I was actually doing what needed to be done versus just sort of, testing things out. So there was a lot of, I think, internal pressure for me on, this is how you should be spending it, this is how much. I kept a very close eye on the budget, still do. Same with the funding that I've received from Main Street Ventures. So while most of my funding has been through grants, there is a lot of, again, personal pressure that I put on myself probably to ensure that that money is spent responsibly.
Yeah, so for me, I mentioned that I went through the Venture Lab program. I was incredibly fortunate to get grant funding through the Venture Labs, which allowed us to take the medical device orientation with our platform. So that kind of really helped get our product development started and validate our solution. Since then, we've gotten a grant from Main Street Ventures to help with some IP activities. And we're actually going through a pre-seed funding round right now. So that has been a huge learning experience for me, given that all of our previous funding has been from grant funding opportunities. So really excited about that. We're raising a $500,000 round that we're hoping to close here soon.
So we started off self-funded. Sophia and I, we took our credit as far as we could, purchasing 6 vehicles. And then we were lucky enough to get connected with Nancy and Aviatra, and we were able to receive a grant through our pitch and pitch night, and then we were able to get a grant from Main Street Ventures. So we're hoping that these things are going to take us to the next level. I believe that they are. But yeah, we started sort of bootstrapping it, and then started to reach out to other people.
Love that. Thank you for all the plugs for Main Street, by the way. Love this. Well, one thing that strikes me, though, as you guys are all speaking about this, too, is the support that you've all received from the ecosystem. And I love seeing that theme woven in here. So I'm going to add a question that I didn't prep you for, so apologies. But I'm just curious because I know a lot of entrepreneurs that we speak with, and Nancy, I'm sure you speak with too, don't necessarily know how to navigate the ecosystem. So Emily, since you have the mic and you talked about getting connected with Nancy and Aviatra, how did you go about that? How did you go about finding out that these resources exist?
Well, I think we first heard about Aviatra at Cincy Startup 2 years ago. And then we, yeah, so a plug for everyone here. And then we were just at a point in our business where we were really looking for some guidance, and we were able to come across the SCORE mentorship program, and then they sort of reintroduced us to Aviatra, and then luckily one thing has led to another, So yeah, it is hard, I think, and you do need support, but Cincinnati is there for you. I mean, I feel like when we've looked and researched, we've been able to find, and one person has connected us to the next person, so.
Awesome. Don't feel obligated, but I'd love to hear if you want to share.
Yeah, sure. So I got really lucky getting connected to the Venture Labs because when I was presenting my project in school, someone from the Venture Labs was there. So that's kind of the luck of my journey. And then the Venture Labs connected us to a lot within the ecosystem, one of which was Main Street. And then when we got the Main Street Ventures grant, we got connected to Generator's G-Beta program. And so that was a really good experience to kind of kick off our more serious involvement in the Cincinnati ecosystem outside of UC. So I think it's been kind of this funnel, keep going and meeting more people, but I feel like everyone within that ecosystem has been so incredibly supportive of me as a female founder, which is really exciting to see.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I will say, well, number one, I'm really nosy. So if there is something going on, then I want to know about it. And I'm really good at Googling. I've always loved research. But like you guys were saying, kind of once you talk to one person, they will lead you to the next, and that person will lead you to the next. It's kind of like falling down the Wikipedia rabbit hole. And Cincinnati tends to be a really supportive city. If people see you trying to do something, for the most part, there are no more than, I don't know, like 3 or 4 degrees of separation between anybody here. So if they see you trying to do something, then they are super happy to connect you with somebody else who might be able to help you get further.
I love that. I couldn't agree with that more. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that those answers with that unplanned question. Now back to the regularly scheduled questioning. So what have been some of your biggest learnings so far? And Tamia, we can go right back to you since you have the mic, and I'll make it easy.
Sure. Biggest learnings. You can do more than you think you can. So I am typically somebody who likes to think things through 100% all the way. You don't always have time for that as an entrepreneur. That's just not always possible. But, you can figure things out on the spot or do what you can in, I don't know, the 10 minutes you have between meetings when it's necessary. So the biggest thing for me has been just believe you can get it done, and you will.
I think for me, it's things take a lot longer than you think. So I think you hear about all these startup stories and you don't appreciate how long it takes to get there. So I think I've learned to appreciate the journey and where you are, but definitely did not expect things to kind of take this long, especially starting a business out of school.
I feel like, when am I not learning? I feel like this being, our
Spoken
first.
like a true teacher.
Yeah, I feel like being an entrepreneur and starting a business is like a school of learning. So I don't think that I can pinpoint, one particular thing. I think I've learned a lot about myself. That's I guess like the biggest learning, but you're constantly learning.
Yeah, agree.
So, part of the purpose of this whole week is to inspire other entrepreneurs and all learn from each other. So, what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs out there, especially other women, who might be kind of teetering on that brink of going full time and taking the plunge versus having a side hustle?
I think, like we kind of discussed, listening to your gut, I think, is the most important thing, and not letting fear prevent you from making bold moves. I think you have to make bold moves, and you can be afraid, but you can't let that get in the way.
Yeah, so I would, I totally just blanked what I was going to say. I'll let you go, and then I'll come back to me. Sorry.
Okay, I'll try to say something that triggers whatever was in your mind before. So I completely agree. Don't let fear hold you back. And I'm going to go ahead and keep it real. I got married a little earlier this year, and I don't know that I would have been able to do the full-time thing without having that support when it comes to things like health insurance and ensuring there's a roof over my head and food on the table. So, not to make it sound like you have to depend on a man. Ladies, you don't need no man. But making sure that you have those things in place will free up a lot of your brain space and emotional capacity to ensure that you can dedicate what you need to dedicate to your business.
Okay, it did spark, so we're good. So I would say that I've learned more in the past 3 years than I ever imagined that I would, and I think I've learned more than I would have going a different route. And so I think that even if you do fail, you still learn so much more, and it's totally worth it.
Thank you guys so much, ladies, so much. Are there any last parting words you'd like to share with the audience? Anything, that we haven't asked you today that you feel you want to get out there?
I guess I'll start. I would just like to thank everyone at Startup Cincy Week. I think it's a great opportunity for young founders who are interested in maybe taking that leap or have already taken that leap to meet people within the ecosystem. I know that I've attended all of the years that I've been on this journey, and so I think it's a great way to kind of get the community together, especially in the pandemic world when it's nice to be here when we're not on Zoom. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're 3D. We all actually exist in 3D life. There's dimension to us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
I would say the same thing that I pretty much say to anybody that comes to me with a question, and that is, if you have an idea or you're trying to do something, just put it out there. One of the things that I find when I talk to people is they have these fantastic ideas in their brains, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Go for it. What are you doing? Who are you telling? They're like, oh, I haven't told anybody yet. Put it out there. You never know. That's the product market research portion of the program that can be super helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just kind of absolutely agree with both of what you said. But I think that once you put it out there, I think then you can kind of sort of get a feel, and you start to get these signs from the universe. And so just keep listening and look for those pieces of confirmation, and they come in all different ways and all different times. And when you really do least expect it, and just do it. Put yourself out there. It's worth it.
Lean in. Love it.
Yeah.
Nancy, anything you want to share? Put you on the spot.
Right. No, I'm just so impressed with all three of you. And, I think you've all kind of said it different ways, but sometimes you just have to throw it on the wall and see if it sticks. You can't overthink it, but you also have to mitigate those risks. And I think you've all done a really great job of taking some big risks, but calculated risks. Because many times as young entrepreneurs, we are spending other people's money. And we do feel a real sense of obligation, and that's important, and that needs to be, that's a valid concern. So, but I just love that you have just done it, and that you continue to do it, and that you all three are continually reaching out for help, because there will never be a point in our journey as entrepreneurs where we don't need somebody else's help. And you will have the opportunity to help other people. And I know that you all have already, when people have asked you for help, you've given help. So I think that's how it all works. And I just think this is great fun, and we could talk all day. So sorry, everybody else.
No, I love that. Somebody asked me here recently, what I believe the top 3 traits of entrepreneurs are. And as Nancy said, one that I think is often forgotten is don't silo yourself, meaning you can help others. You're not competing against each other, and that's one thing I think that's great about the startup ecosystem as a whole, but especially you 3 ladies, knowing you personally. You have definitely wanted to help and give back, and you're doing it today. So cannot thank you all enough for your insights. I'm so certain that there were more than a few entrepreneurs out there inspired by what you guys said today and what you shared. So I can't thank you all enough again for being here. So these women are incredible, and I'm sure by the end of this panel session now that most of you, all of you will agree with that. So I hope you leave today's session a little bit more motivated than you were before. And thank you so much for being with us today, and these ladies, and have a great rest of Startup Week.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, ladies.